joining us today. My name is Chell Miller. I'm the Program Director for the Government Law Center at Albany Law School. We are so glad to have you all here for this important discussion. Today, we'll be learning about the process of voting for students in New York State, whether you're a law student, undergraduate student, a graduate student, or a high school student who might be eligible to vote in the November election. Our goal is to provide you with factual and nonpartisan information about the voting process in New York. We're joined today by Kate Doran from the League of Women Voters in New York City, as well as Kathleen McGrath and Jennifer Wilson from the New York State Board of Elections. I'll give them a moment to introduce themselves in just a second. First, I'd like to get some housekeeping out of the way. Live automated captioning is available for this program. To view the captions, you'll click or tap on the bottom of your Zoom window, a button that says show subtitles. It might also say show captions or transcript. We are also recording this session for future viewing. If you have questions for our guest speakers, please type your question in the Q&A box. To access that box, you'll click or tap the button on the bottom of your screen that says Q&A. I will keep an eye on audience questions throughout the program, and we've set aside some time for the audience Q&A after the discussion. Finally, I want to express the Government Law Center's gratitude to our co-sponsors who help make programs like this happen. Thank you to the Albany Law School Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, the Albany Law School Student Bar Association, as well as the League of Women Voters of New York and the League of Women Voters of Albany County, and of course the State Board of Elections for participating here too. So I'd like to take a moment to ask our panelists to briefly introduce themselves and their roles at their respective institutions. So I'll pass it to Kate to start.
Hi there, everyone. I'm delighted to be here. My name is Kate Doran. I live in Brooklyn, New York, and I've been a member of the League of Women Voters of the City of New York since 1977. So I'm steeped in League. And I currently serve on the board of the State League, the Albany board. And I've got the grand title of election specialist, which doesn't mean that I'm an expert by any stretch, but it means that I pay attention and I'm learning all the time. And I certainly expect to be learning quite a lot through my experience here today. And I want to make a special shout out to Jen Wilson, who was our deputy executive director for many, many years. And now we're delighted that she's over there at the State Board of Elections. It's really it's wonderful for us. So thank you.
How about Kathleen?
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kathleen McGrath, and I am the Director of Public Information for the New York State Board of Elections. I've been with the State Board for about 9.5 years now in campaign finance and compliance. And then I became the Public Information Officer just over a year ago. So I'm excited to be here and talk with Albany Law School, the Government Law Center, and the League of Women Voters to talk about what's sure to be an exciting, I guess it's fewer than 6 weeks now, I believe, till Election Day. So there we go. Happy to be here.
All right, and Jen, how about you?
Hi, I'm Jennifer Wilson. I'm the Deputy Director for the New York State Board of Elections, and you can probably tell I'm currently recovering from illness. In my role, I support Kathleen, and that is what I'll be doing today in providing links to all the things Kathleen is going to talk about today. So thank you so much for having me.
Great, thank you. So before we dive into the discussion, I have a poll. I'd like to poll the folks in the room. You should have just had a window pop up asking who's in the room. You know, select which category kind of best describes you. You know, just to get a sense of who we are talking to, what our audience is. I have a suspicion that I know who most folks will be. Awesome. Thank you. So it looks like we have some law students, some undergraduate students in four-year colleges, and we have some folks who I know work here at the law school, and some folks who are joining us from the category of other, which are some, I think, some of our wonderful folks at the League of Women Voters. So thank you for humoring me in that for a second. So we wanted to talk about kind of that overall process of voting for students. The first question that I usually get is, how do I know if I'm eligible to vote? And how do I find this thing out? Um, Kathleen, is that something you can share with us?
Absolutely, be happy to. So there are certain qualifications in order to register to vote in New York State. Number one, first and foremost, you need to be a United States citizen in order to participate in any elections within the state. You must be 18 years old or older in order to vote, although pre-registration is available for 16 and 17-year-olds. While you can get that pre-registration in, you are not allowed to actually participate in voting until you do turn 18. You must be a resident of the state and the county, city, or village for at least 30 days prior to Election Day. That's the third qualification. Fourth, you need to not be in prison for a felony conviction. So those that are on parole or awaiting trial or sentencing, they are still eligible to vote. But if you are incarcerated for a felony, you are not permitted to vote in New York. You need to not be adjudged mentally incompetent by a court. And you also, lastly, must not claim the right to vote anywhere else. You can only vote in one location. So those are the 6 basic qualifications in order to register to vote in New York.
Okay, thank you. So this is the next part is kind of a two-part thing. If I'm not registered, how do I register to vote? Or, if I'm not sure if I'm registered, how do I check
Sure.
that?
Absolutely. So I believe my screen is shared right now.
Yes.
We have a great voter lookup tool on the state board's website. This is the state board's website, elections.ny.gov. We certainly encourage you to come to our website or your local county board's website for any information you might need about voting or elections. The first tab is to register to vote. So if I click the registration to vote, actually, we talked about view qualifications. What I just went over is right there. And we will drop links to there, but those are the qualifications. If you're unsure if you're already registered, you can check your status, and that's through our voter lookup tool. It's voterlookup.elections.ny.gov, where you would select your county, you put in your name, your date of birth, and your zip, and it would be able to show you if you are in fact registered and where you're registered if that's the case. But if you know you're not registered, there are 3 different ways really to register to vote. The first is online, and we'll go through all these. The second's in person, and the third is by mail. And that's what you see next on your screen. So we do have what's called online voter registration, OVR, in New York State, where you can register to vote right online through the registration portal. Just to note, if you to do online, you do need what's called an ny.gov ID. If you've created that by using services of a different state agency, you may already have that. If not, it's very easy to create that. And when you click on the online voter registration portal, it's going to bring you to log in there. Very easy, all done on your computer, and that record is then sent to the county board. As some background, we have a bottom-up voter registration system in this state. The state board doesn't register voters. It's all those 62 county, those local boards of elections that register voters and update their registration. So right there's the online voter registration portal, super easy. That's also how you could update your registration. Maybe you've moved, maybe you want to change your party affiliation. Maybe your name has changed, whatever the case may be. But registering online is certainly an option right there. I'm going to click back here. You can register in person as well. Now, in New York State, you have a few options of where in person. Number one, always at your local county board of elections. I'm a resident of Albany County. I could go to the Albany County Board of Elections and register to vote there. Also, a number of state agencies are National Voter Registration Act, NVRA sites. So first, foremost, actually beginning back in the early 90s, the Department of Motor Vehicles became a site where you can also register to vote. If you've ever been to the DMV, on their forms they do have, and you're updating your address for the DMV for your license, you also have an option to register to vote or update your voter information there in one fell swoop. Other agencies, Department of Health, Department of Labor, a number of state agencies where in person, as you're getting services from those agencies, you'd also be able to register to vote right there. So that's where you can do it in person. And you can read more about the National Voter Registration Act right on that page as well. And lastly, you can register by mail. You can get a form. If you don't have a form or the ability to print one, you can actually contact us and we'll send you a form. Otherwise, you can print the form on your own, fill it out, complete it, and send it to your local county board. And we do have the forms here in English and Spanish. We also have accessible voting forms as well. If there's any, let me actually go back here. If there's any issues in terms of having accessibility issues when you're registering to vote. So you have all the forms where you can do that. So you have options. Basically, we want to make it easy as possible to register yourself to vote, whether it's online, in person, or by mail.
Right. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, one of the questions that I often get when I'm volunteering or out in the world is, I moved. Does that affect my voter registration? Um, how do you respond to that?
Yep, right on your screen there, any changes you need to make, those name of the address, the change of party enrollment, if you're looking to cancel your registration, all of that can be done in any of the ways I just went over in terms of the online portal, in person, or by mail. Any of those can be done. I will say so. Registration needs to be done by 10 days before the election to which you'd want to be voting in. Party affiliation, party enrollment is a little bit different in that has to be done annually by Valentine's Day, February 14th, to be able to participate in the party's primary that year. Obviously, party enrollment does not affect your ability to participate in the general election. That's open to all voters, whether they're enrolled in a party or not. But we do have a closed primary system in New York. So in order to vote in the Democratic Party, you need to be an enrolled Democrat. In order to vote in Republican, you need to be an enrolled Republican. And the deadline for that is pretty early in the year. It's February 14th. And then on an off year, we just have the June primary, whereas this year we also had the presidential primary on April 2nd.
Shell, may I chime in here with an addition and maybe a little question, clarifying question for Kathleen?
Yeah, please do.
We've had what's called registration portability in New York State since 2019, and I'm old enough to remember that you had to re-register every couple of years. No, that is no longer the case. You're permanently registered in New York State. But sometimes a voter will wake up the day before an election and realize, oh my goodness, I've moved and I didn't update my registration. As long as they've been, as Kathleen pointed out, living in that locale, that domicile for at least 30 days before election, if you show up at the poll site that is associated with where you currently live, you can vote on an affidavit ballot and that vote will be counted. You'll get a letter. I know in New York City, they'll send you a letter and say, we've updated your registration and we've captured all that information and your vote will count because you're at the poll site that's associated where you currently live. So I think, Kathleen, can you confirm that or add anything?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We do a lot of proactive pushing to communicate with New Yorkers about deadlines. As I mentioned, October 26th would be the deadline to register for the November 5th general election. But people fall through the cracks, things happen, people forget. And yes, there is the ability to vote by affidavit ballot, and presuming that everything in the affidavit was correct, then that would be counted as. But we would try to get people ahead of that and make sure people change that and update their registration by that 10-day deadline. Now, when you move county to county in New York State, when you do re-register, or not re-register, but when you update your registration or your new address, there's communication between those county boards that basically says, hey, old county, we have this person now, so you can, get their record, will travel with them to their new county.
Right, right. And we're with the league, so we want everybody to vote. So please, if you're unsure, show up. There's going to be a very helpful poll worker at the poll site, and they will understand what you need to do, and they want you to vote.
Great, thank you for that. So we have actually a question from a student, and this brings us to, I think, our next question. The student is not in a position to change their address to their current apartment. So what are, their options, and in general, kind of what are the different ways we can vote?
So this is a common issue for college students. As a college student who's living either away at school, maybe perhaps on an on-campus dorm, off-campus apartment, you do have the option of staying registered back where you came from, like where your home is. For example, I grew up in the Rochester, New York area, and then I went to SUNY Buffalo. So in that case, decades ago, I could stay registered at my parents' address in Rochester, or I could update the registration to where I was living in the dorms at UB. So you do have that option as a student. I'll be very honest. I actually kept my registration back with my parents because, your dorm changes a lot. Having a more stable apartment might be a longer term, but, I knew I was only living in this dorm for, September to May or whatever the case may be, and I'd get a new one next year. So you certainly can update your registration to that new address, and then you'd be voting in the location where you go to school. Or you can choose to vote by mailed ballot. I'm going to talk about those in just a second, back where you are still registered back home, wherever that may be. And so I can speak to that in New York State. We have two ways to vote by mail now. One is called absentee, that's been in place for a long, long time, and then something that's pretty new called early vote by mail. Both are ways to obtain a mail-in ballot. And I'm actually going to scroll here. So my next tab is ways to vote. So request a ballot. So any New York State voter is allowed to request an early mail ballot. You don't need a reason. I say that because when I scroll down, actually absentee, which has been on the law for a long time, there was a reason required. But anyone can request an early mail ballot. You can do that right through. We have an online portal right here on our webpage. And then, or you can download the forms and mail it into your county board of elections. So if you'd like to vote by mail to the questioner there, you certainly could request an early mail ballot, get it from your county board, and return it. And I'll talk about due dates in just a moment, but if you scroll down just a little bit lower, absentee, and this is what's been on the books for long decades and decades. But in order to get an absentee ballot, you needed a reason of why you needed it. One, you were going to be absent from the county. So going back a couple decades to my college days, I was in Erie County going to college, and my home was in Monroe County. So that was my reason to get an absentee ballot, because I would be absent from the county on election day. Other reasons are things like I'm unable to appear at the polls due to an illness or disability. I'm the primary caregiver for someone who's ill or disabled. I'm a patient, a resident of a VA hospital, or I'm in jail or prison for anything other than a felony conviction. So those are the reasons that basically a voter would attest to, that I am unable to get to the polls, so I need a mail-in ballot. That also, absentee, you can apply right through. We have an online portal right there. We also have the forms there, which you could print and mail in. Even if you do apply online, this is a question we get a lot, you have to still mail in the ballot. We do not have online voting in New York State. So you're still, even if you put in a request online, or even getting a little deeper into the weeds for our folks that are military or overseas, I'm not sure we have any of those on the call today, but they actually can receive their ballot electronically, but all ballots get returned in physical form in New York State. So those are the two options to vote by mail to that questioner if you want to keep that address back where you lived before college. In both cases, the request through an application or by mail needs to come in excuse me, by October the 26th. But to go in person to get it, you actually have till the day before Election Day, which is November 4th. In any case, though, for our mailed ballots, early mail or absentee, you do need to either get a postmark on it by November 5th, which is Election Day, or return it to any poll site in your county or the County Board of Elections by the end of the 5th. And that a little additional information with the postmark of the 5th, it still needs to get to the board by the 12th. So you actually have 7 days then. But by the 5th, that ballot needs to be out of your hands one way or another. So those are the ways if you want to vote away from home. as Chell takes a sip.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Of course.
Yeah, and if you have any other questions about that process, feel free to add them in the chat. We can address those later too. So if you're voting early, so early mail voting is a thing now in New York State, as well as early in-person voting.
Yes.
You know, what are things to expect, I guess, with that, and if you're interested in doing that?
So New York State now has 9 days of early in-person voting as well. That went into effect. That was a law change, I believe, in 2019. So we're still relatively new to the in-person early voting. If I go under the ways to vote and go to poll site and voter lookup, oh, I don't want to hit that actually. I want to hit ways to vote right now. So again, we talked about searching your voter information to see where you're registered, but early voting is an option for all New Yorkers. It's a 9 days of voting that starts 2 Saturdays before Election Day. So this year it'll start October 26th and it runs to the Sunday before Election Day. So it's 9 days inclusive. This year, October 26th through November 3rd. The hours and sites for the early voting do vary by county. So we would encourage you to talk to your county board to get those hours. There are some requirements in statute of, longer hours, evening hours and stuff to accommodate various schedules. And then in-person voting does stop at the end of that Sunday. There's no voting that Monday. It's like a little breather we get in between, and then Election Day is Tuesday the 5th. So I would certainly, if you want to vote early in one of those 9 days, if Election Day is not convenient for you, certainly contact your county board and they'd be able to give you the names of sites and their hours of operation during those 9. But everyone in the state has those 9 days. It's just the hours and locations vary by county. And then, of course, you can always vote on Election Day. And in Election Day, the polls are open. You will have an assigned poll site. That's an important difference for early voting too. Outside of New York City, voters can vote at any poll site in their county during early voting. New York City has specific assigned poll sites for the early voting, and that has to do with population density and all the different ballot styles they have in that area. But for example, if you lived in, say, Fulton County, you could go to any early voting site in Fulton County during early voting. Whereas on Election Day, we all have an assigned poll site based on where we live.
Great, thank you. So before we move out of the actual day of voting or, early voting, is there an advantage to voting if we're voting by mail? Is there an advantage to voting absentee versus early ballot, or what are really the distinctions, that people might think about?
Really, the distinction is that absentee always required a reason that you can't get to the polls. Early mail vote, which is brand new in the state, doesn't require a reason. But in terms of what you're getting ballot-wise and what you're voting on and how you're returning it, the processes are basically identical. So, if you just don't want to go to the polls, then early mail ballot is your choice. If you have one of the excuses that are listed, that are laid out, you qualify to select absentee, but there's nothing that would prevent you from selecting early vote by mail.
Right.
Let me add that there's a opportunity with an absentee ballot application to get on the permanent absentee list. If you're an individual who's disabled in some way, and you know that there is absolutely no way you're ever going to be able to walk or get yourself to a poll site, you can go onto what's called the permanent absentee list. But to do that, you'd have to use the absentee ballot application. The early mail ballot application, I believe, Kathleen, is just for whatever election event is coming up right now.
Right, that's a great point, Kate. Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, so if it is a permanent situation, if it's, you know, a chronic disability or whatever the case may be, absentee, and you could select permanent absentee. I will caution folks, because we're running into this, if someone who's on the permanent absentee does apply for early vote by mail, that kind of makes their permanent absentee status undone a bit. So there's a bit of, I'm not sure that would affect anyone on the call today, but certainly something to keep in mind. If you are permanent absentee, stick with that method. But otherwise, there's really, to Kira's question, there's no benefit one way or another.
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. And to kind of reiterate it, it sounds like if you are, you know, a student who's from maybe a different part of the state or another state, I think if there's another state, you're going to have to check on, you know, the voting policies in that state. But an absentee voting might be an option if you're, you know, a student who's coming from, right, in Kathleen's example, Rochester, going to school, you know, elsewhere in the state, to be able to keep their voting address, you know, back home, so to speak.
Yeah.
So thank you. Before we move forward, I do want to share a couple of things for folks at Albany Law School who, you know, they're not sure if they're registered yet. You know, you can check out the links that have been shared in the chat to check your registration. And if you're not registered, we do have a few voter registration drives coming up. So this week, there will be one in the DAMC, and on October 16th, the League of Women Voters of Albany Law School will be registering voters during lunchtime. They'll also have absentee ballot applications and early vote by mail applications, if that's something that you're interested in filling out. So
I would add to that too, because we do get questions about, you know, outside groups registering people to vote or having mail ballot applications. And what's important to remember, it's only those county boards that register. I think so.
Right.
I think it can be confusing sometimes. You know, even with the best of intentions, certainly forms can be handed out by any outside groups, forms can be delivered, but it's only those county boards that are processing those registrations, confirming identities, and actually issuing ballots.
Right. Thank you. Yes, to clarify, they'll be passing out the
Yes.
applications.
Your wording was
to
perfect.
register
I
to
just
vote.
wanted to be sure.
That's great. Thank you. And so when your, you know, registration's approved, when you receive your ballot, you know, what can we expect to see on it?
All
You
right.
know,
Well, as you may be aware, it's kind of a busy election year. I mentioned earlier we had the presidential in April. We've had a number of state level specials. We had the federal, state in June, and local primary in June. And here we've almost made it to November, the general election. And as I mentioned, in general elections, all registered voters can participate. But what you see on your ballot very much will depend on where you live. So everyone in New York State is going to have a few things on their ballot. Number one is you're going to have electors for president and vice president. And the candidates that have qualified for that are Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. So you're going to be voting for the electors for those particular candidates, as well as everyone in the state will have one of our Senate seats is up. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand's seat is up. So that will be on everyone in the state's ballot. And then another thing is we do have a statewide ballot proposal that I'm actually going to share a bit more on. And as I'm clicking through screens here, one of the things I want to talk about, everything else that's on your ballot is going to vary by where you live, because all the different, you might have town offices, you might have county level offices, city, village, things like that. Oh, and I will say everyone will have a state assembly member and a state senator, but obviously those candidates will vary based on where you live. So one of the tabs I have open here is actually the Albany County Board of Elections, which again is where I live and maybe a number of you live as well. All the county boards have websites, and you can find sample ballots by communicating with your county board. Albany County lays it out great. It's right on here on the top left. So just for fun and hypotheticals, we're going to go and look at what some sample ballots look like here. So these are all the different jurisdictions, municipalities within Albany County. We're going to make this even more fun. I'm going to Town of Colony is where we're going to click on here. And then they have all the election districts. ED is what that stands for. In some other states, they refer to them as precincts. We have election districts in New York. So, but depending on where you live, which ED you live in, you could click and see the ballot that you'll see. So I like the number 25. That's what I'm going to click on. And I'll wait, just make sure you can see the ballot now that's on your screen and open for you. So you'll see, as I mentioned, electors for president and vice president are going to be first. That U.S. senator that I mentioned. Now we have representative Congress, a member of Congress, they're up every 2 years, as well as state senator and member of assembly. The actual names in there are going to vary by where you live, but they're there. Albany County also has their district attorney up, a surrogate court judge, some family court judges. So those are the offices. And again, those will vary based on where you live. I wish I could show you one ballot will be exactly what you see, but unless you live in ED 25 in the town of Colony, you won't see exactly this, but I promise it'll be close enough. What you'll see on every ballot will be the names of the commissioners and the county you're in, as well as instructions. You'll see the 4 official parties in the state of New York are the Democrats, Republicans, Conservatives, and Working Families. There are ways to get on the ballot as like an independent body, which in this case there is one. There's a candidate representing LaRouche, which is it's not an official party in the state of New York, but it's a way to add another ballot line for someone or to get on a ballot based on not one of the 4 parties. And then you can choose and you'd fill in bubbles. I know you all are students or have been students. You know how to fill out bubbles on tests. Same sort of situation here. So you can, and it'll tell you instructions of how many are voting. So most are 1, but you have things like family court judge here. You can actually vote up to 3. You don't have to. You also are not required to vote in every race. You know, maybe it's just the presidential race or the Senate race that's bringing you out. You pick and choose. It's your ballot. It's your private ballot. It's what you want to fill out on it. This ballot, on the other side of the ballot, there will be the instructions and the ballot proposition. Now, I will caveat that and say if you have an exceptionally long ballot, theoretically, this could be on a whole nother sheet of paper. But for most folks in the state, you're going to have your candidates on one side and on the other side, the ballot proposition. Again, everyone's going to see proposal 1, no matter where you are in the state. That's the other thing that's absolutely on everyone's ballot. You potentially could have some local ballot propositions here, which would be over here after proposal. And no matter where you are in the state, number 1 is this amendment to the state constitution. It's been dubbed Equal Rights Amendment, ERA. You may have heard that term. So that's going to be the first question with a yes or a no. There's instructions there. And then if there were others, they were there. So I want to bring you back to our webpage to read up on the statewide ballot proposal. And I know Kate's going to speak about this. We do have under election information, statewide ballot proposal there, and you could read the text of what you're voting on, as well as the abstract, the form of submission, as well as the certification in both English and Spanish of what this ballot proposal is. So, so that is what's going to, so electors for president, vice president, U.S. Senate, and Prop 1. Everyone's ballot will be identical for that. All of their offices will be based on where you live.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. And so while we're looking at the statewide ballot proposal, Kate, would you like to jump in and provide a very short explanation of, what voters are being asked about and also what voting yes or no means?
Sure, thank you. We in the League of Women Voters very, very carefully guard our reputation for being nonpartisan when it comes to candidates or political parties, but we do take positions on issues. Now, this is an issue that's very, very dear to us, and we are very strongly in favor. So we are out there encouraging every voter who's going to vote yes on this proposal. Currently in the New York State Constitution, which is a huge tome, nothing like the US Constitution, which is a tiny little thing, there is protection against discrimination based on race and religion. But that's not good enough for us in New York State. We believe we need further protections. So this will expand and make that protection against discrimination much more robust. As you can see here, if you're looking at the screen, protections against discrimination based on ethnicity, national origin, age, disability, very important, sex, including sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression. Now here we go, pregnancy outcomes, and reproductive health care and autonomy. The word abortion does not appear in this proposal, but we're not unhappy about that. We believe that pregnancy outcomes and reproductive health care and autonomy is going to do the job for us. So that's the proposal. And last year, we think that the governor signed a law called the Plain Language Law. So this proposal is one of the first that's testing that law. It is meant to require that no proposal should be written in language that's more complicated than an 8th grade reading level. I think this one, and I think Kathleen can tell us that this language was tested and that critics were as pleased as they could be. So please, I'm encouraging all of you, if you're confused about anything on the front of the ballot or the other front of the ballot, make certain that whatever you do, you vote yes on this prop.
And while I certainly
Thank you.
appreciate Kate's commentary, I will just, for clarification, as the state board, we are not advocating for or against the ballot proposition. It's our job just to put it on the ballot and put out what basically we get draft language from the Attorney General. Bipartisanly here at the state board, we draft the language. It was up for public comment during the summer, and then the commissioners did certify this language based on feedback and the desire to have the reading level as low as possible. Legislative text can be very high level reading, so we want to make sure that it is accessible to all New Yorkers to understand what they're voting on. So this is what will be on the ballot. It is an amendment to the state constitution. It does go number 1 on everyone's ballot, and then, as Kate mentioned there, it does explain that a yes vote puts these protections in the state constitution, and no vote leaves those specific protections out of the state constitution. So you can certainly read about that on our website. All of that information's there, and actually just clicking back, this is how it will look in real practice for you on the ballot. It'll be on that other side from the candidates, and it may be accompanied by local ballot props as well, but that is the only one that is statewide.
Great. Thank you. Thank you both for that explanation. And would also like to note the Government Law Center's role also is to, neither advocate for or against, any particular position or candidate. But what we want to do is make sure that, governments and individuals and communities have the information that they need to make the choices, that feel right to them. So thank you both very much. As a reminder, look at all sides of the ballot when you receive your ballot. Yeah, thank you. As we kind of move forward here too, so in terms of, voting on the day of elections, can we take time off work to vote in person? And can that only be on election day, or can we do that during early voting too?
So as we just went through, New Yorkers now have a ton of options when it comes to voting, whether you want to go in early in person on election day. I'll admit I love going on election day. That's my thing. I haven't voted absentee since I was in those dorm rooms in Buffalo. But and then you also have those mail ballots for early vote by mail and absentee. But there does exist in election law the ability, it's under Section 3 of election law, that if you do not have 4 consecutive hours to vote, either from the opening of the polls to the closing, and on election day, the hours are standardized at 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. across the state. If you don't have 4 consecutive hours, you may take up take off up to 2 hours without loss of pay from your job. So for example, if you go to work at 7 a.m. and you work till 7 p.m., that does not give you 4 consecutive hours. You would only have 1 from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. and then 2 from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. in which you could feasibly vote on election day. So there is the provision in the law that you could take up to 2 hours to go vote on election day. And I will mention it has not been litigated whether this applies to early voting or not, but it's generally seen as applying to election day only, as that is your last chance. Certainly if early voting on Monday doesn't work for you, try Tuesday. If it doesn't work on Tuesday, try Wednesday. You have 9 chances to do it. And you could go in person and get a mail ballot still up until the day before. But election day is really your last chance. So if you haven't voted by then at that point that would come into play. There's information in the law about notifying your employer, requesting it not less than 2 days, but not more than 10 days before the day of election that you are requesting this time off, and it's without loss of pay. So I would say not as applicable now that we have other avenues by which to vote, but it still exists within the law.
Thank you. Great. And when we've got a couple questions we'll try to get through before we wrap up. When we do go to our voting location in person, we are greeted by poll workers
My
who
favorite
are
people.
there for so long and are doing an incredible service. Can you explain either, Kathleen and Kate, please feel free to jump into, what are poll workers doing? And, how can you volunteer to be one?
Your poll workers are your neighbors, they're your friends, they're the people you see in the supermarket, people that you work alongside. They are quite frankly my favorite people because they are showing up to work at the polls to serve and help their neighbors participate in our elections. So poll workers, they prepare the polling places for voting, they set up the equipment, they check in the voters, they can demonstrate voting procedures to the voters, they can assist voters only if they're requested to do so, they close down the polling place, and then they canvass and report the results. They are everyday people, so I would certainly take this moment this would be my pitch, my official pitch, that if you're interested in being a poll worker, there's certainly great need for poll workers in the state. As I mentioned, we're on about our 100th election this year. And for every election, there is 9 days of early voting plus election day. And you need poll workers at all those moments where the polls are open. So I'm going to click right under election information on our website. We do have the Become a Poll Worker page. There's Help America Vote has a great little video here you can see. In order to be a poll worker, you simply need to be a registered voter in New York State. However, there is under education law the ability that if your school participates, you can be a poll worker at 17, but your school district needs to participate in a particular state ed program. So you certainly can ask that of your school if someone is 17 years old. Interpreters that work as poll workers actually don't need to be registered voters, but all other poll workers do need to be registered. If you live in a county, you'll be assigned to work at a poll site within that county. If you live in New York City, you'll be assigned to one of the 5 boroughs. I just talked about the tasks. Again, we need them for all days of early voting, those 9 days plus election day. You do get paid for being a poll worker. So that's good news. You get paid for when you're trained and the days you work. Pay does vary across the state by county. It's the county boards, again, that administer the recruitment of poll workers and the assignments that they have for voting days. But we do have on our website, if you live within New York City, there's one particular poll worker form. If you live outside New York City, there's a form and you can complete that. That gets sent to your county board and then they contact you about getting registered as a poll worker, what training days exist. Some counties do in person, some do online, things like that. And then there's just some educational materials as well here. So it's really easy to apply, and the county board communicates with you on the details. but it's so important. Without poll workers, we wouldn't be able to run these elections smoothly. So, and there's always a shortage. There's always a need to recruit more. I mean, obviously people have, people work full time, might not have that availability. But we want, if you do have the ability, we would encourage anyone, especially younger folks, starting out, start that plan of civic duty and be a poll worker. That's my pitch.
Thank you. Kate, do you have
Okay.
anything to add?
So I was going to say that the New York City Board of Elections is in the midst of a recruitment drive, the like of which they have never done before. I listened to WNYC, and it's the recruitment pitch is on every hour or so. I've got this little flyer here, and if you have friends in New York City who might want to be a poll worker, please encourage them to go to the Board of Elections, City Board of Elections website. It's pollworker.vote.nyc. And the BOE in the city is always in need of interpreters. And my understanding is that interpreters don't even have to be citizens. They certainly do not have to be registered voters. I don't think they even have to be citizens. You could check that out. And the other thing about interpreters, the board will allow split shifts for the interpreters. They've been very reluctant to do that in connection with the inspectors or other clerks, but they are so desperate for interpreters that I think that they will make all sorts of accommodations. The pay won't be the same $250 if you don't work the full day, but if you have friends in New York City, please encourage them. Again, that's pollworker.vote.nyc. And I'm a poll worker. I can tell you that it's a very, very satisfying thing to do. You really feel like you're on the front lines of democracy, and you are a customer service person. You're serving your neighbors, and it's very, very satisfying.
And outside of New York City, I will say there are some counties that do split shifts for poll workers as well, because they are long day, but that varies by county. And also, I'll note too, just the nomenclature. A poll inspector, poll worker, same thing. So different areas. I heard Kate just say inspector. I want to confirm that we're talking about the same thing here.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Fantastic. Thank you all. And Jen posted a link in the chat too with information about how to become a poll worker in your county. So great. Thank you. So after we've all submitted our votes, right, what is the process next for counting the votes, and when will we know the results of, any given election?
The $1 million
it's loaded.
question in the age of instant gratification, the $1 million question, right? Well, so I'll give you kind of two tracks here. One is about mailed in ballots. When they get returned to the counties, they get the envelopes get verified and signature matches, and they get processed. So anything that's received by election day that's been able to be processed by the county board for mail-in by election day, those tallies will be included in what we call election night results, as well as the early voting, in-person early voting, and the election day voting. However, as I mentioned earlier, there are certain timelines that go well beyond election day. As I mentioned, those absentee and early mail ballots just need to arrive by 7 days after the 12th, as long as they're postmarked by the 5th. So, depending on how your mail works, they might take a day to arrive, might take a handful of days to arrive. Military and overseas citizens, they get even longer. They still have to have it postmarked by election day, but they have 13 days. So that's by November 18th. So ballots are still coming in after election night. So I know polls close at 9, everyone wants results at 9:01, and that'd be great. I'd get to bed a lot earlier, but that does not how it works. So election night results, I would just impress upon you that those are unofficial. They're not complete because votes are still coming in. People that are eligible voters that, have every right for their vote to be counted, those votes are still coming in. There's a lot in election law about how votes get canvassed, recanvassed, if recounts are triggered, things like that. So results aren't finalized until a certification happens, which is, a handful of weeks after election day. A lot of times we may know a winner because the margins are what they are, but I would certainly impress upon you just patience, and keep in mind that what you're seeing reported on both our website, our election night results, as well as county boards, what the media is commenting on, are unofficial. results at that time. And those keep, as votes come in, they're added to the tallies. And as all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted by bipartisan teams. I also want to stress that every vote that's processed in New York is done so by a bipartisan team. There's no single person in a back room counting votes. It's always done. It's also done very transparently. Candidates and their representatives can come watch various countings and things like that happen. The whole process is incredibly transparent to folks and always done in a bipartisan fashion and in a secure fashion. So while it does take time, that patience is well worth it, because we never sacrifice accuracy and security for speed. So we want to make sure it's done right and done properly.
Great, thanks. So a couple other things I'd like to show, or at least be able to see on the Board of Elections website is maybe one, where do we go to see election results after it's certified or even before?
So,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Go ahead, we'll start with that.
So right on our homepage, when the general election is, there will be information right at the top to get your election night results. That site goes down in between elections, since it's a transient unofficial thing. So that's gone right now, but it will have right here. You won't have to dig for it. But under election information, we do have our certified results. Both the most recent election will be certified. This is like just an Excel spreadsheet you can open up there. But we also have an application right embedded into our website where you can see all the past election results. So as I open this up, this is an application we use from a company called Savera, where you can see all of our election certified results. So as to not bring up everything, I'm just going to search this year, 2024 to 2024. And that's going to bring me all the elections that the state board has certified this year so far. Now, I'll say this is going to be your federal level races, your state level races. Tiny town council is not going to be on here. That's going to be on the county board's website. But anything that we would certify will be on here. So you'll see from the June primary for Congress and other things, those results are, you certainly can narrow it down by particular offices, candidates, or if you only cared about a particular election that occurred. Like we had one April 30th special election. So if you just wanted that was a congressional special, that's right there. The presidential primary, which is going to include, I have to X that out. There you go. That's going to include not only the candidates, but also the delegates are going to be there. So any of these races, you can click on to view more information. So just since this one's first, this was a Democratic primary in June for CD16 in Congress. When you click on it, you can see the data based on votes. You can switch this over to percent versus numbers, things like that. You can look at the map and the different districts, and the shading will show you levels of support, a bar chart if you prefer. And if you need the source material, that's always going to be on the left-hand side. So if you want to actually see the raw data in a CSV or a PDF, that's going to be there as well. So you can certainly, once they're certified, we send them off to be input into this, what I think is a pretty nifty looking way to view the results. And you certainly can look at things by tables in list form. I like the grid personally, but then you can narrow down or look at years. I mean, say you have an urge to know what, a congressional race in 2004 happened. It's all right here. So anything we have is here, and that is under election information and then election results. But before it ends up on that application, it will be here once it's certified.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
We have a couple minutes left, and I don't see any questions from the audience. So I will turn it over back to each of you. Maybe we'll start with Kate. If you have thoughts, what else do student voters need to know? What coming into the election?
Oh no, it's a wonderful question, Joe. The first thing I want to say, this is not like a test you haven't studied for. So please don't worry, get out there and vote. Figure out, you've got plenty of time now. Kathleen has explained how you can register either where you are going to school or in your domicile where you live, where you want. You get to choose where you want to register. Maybe you don't even live in New York State and you want to, but don't wait too long if you're going to be applying for an absentee or an early mail ballot, but don't be afraid. Just it's, as I say, it's not like a test you haven't studied for, and you get there and it's the poll workers will help you out. They'll bend over backwards. And we particularly love seeing young people, and we sometimes even do like a hip hip hooray if it's somebody voting for the first time. I know we do that in Brooklyn. I don't know if what you do upstate, but that's what I have to say. Don't be scared, and encourage all of your friends to register and vote. And they may say, oh, I'm not going to bother to vote. I know I'm not going to vote. Register anyway. You don't know at the last minute that you might change your mind. And if you haven't registered, then you're just out of luck. So get in it.
Thank you. Kathleen, how about you?
Yeah.
Any last word?
I agree with everything Kate said. What I would just impress upon you is an issue that I hold near and dear to my heart, and that is about mis and disinformation that's out there about elections. That is one of the biggest struggles we're up against at from the state board's perspective and from county boards, is there's just an awful lot of untruths out there, and social media online is particularly offensive. You know, someone shares a meme or someone makes a post, and then before you know it, it's got a million likes or reshares or reposts, and it might not be based in fact at all. So the best advice I could give anyone is to consult with trusted sources for election information, and that would be the state board and the county board's website. Those are your election officials who are working year round to make sure that the voter rolls are accurate, that elections are run safely and securely. I'll give you right on good example. This is right on your screen. The banner that we have full time right now on our website is because folks were getting unsolicited text messages about their voter registration. That's not coming from us. It's an outside group. And they may have good intentions. I don't want to, necessarily accuse any good or bad intentions, but if it's bad data, then it can cause confusion. So always check with a trusted source like your state or county board. And if you have questions, we'll answer them all day long in terms of as election officials. We want you to have the correct information so you feel empowered to go cast your vote, and also confidence in the process overall.
One thing I forgot to mention, you can check the League of Women Voters vote.411. So that we try very, very hard to get candidates to respond to our questions. We ask the same questions of every candidate, and you can check that out and you'll see what they, we ask them very good questions, and you can see what their responses are and see if those responses align with your values. So that may help you make decisions.
And I'm not sure, I think it might have been Shell that just put in the kit, but we also maintain social media presences on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So follow us. We have an email distribution list that we email folks. You can find it on probably almost every page of our website in terms of being able to follow our social media, sign up to receive email alerts. That's just a good way to get information. I did just see the question, so I actually just highlighted on the screen. October 26th is your magic day. Is the deadline to be able to vote in the November general.
Great. Thank you all. Thank you very much to our speakers. Thank you to our attendees and our fantastic sponsors. So go out, make sure you're registered to vote, and be kind to the poll workers who are there all day.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I see a question here about the social media page names. I will send out an email later on with the links and handles that have been shared in the chat.